Welcome to the GovComms podcast, bringing you the latest insights and innovations from experts and thought leaders around the globe in government communication. Now, here is your host, David Pembroke.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to GovComms, the podcast that examines the practice of content communication in government and the public sector. My name's David Pembroke. Thank you very much for joining me once again. And if you are a first-time listener, thanks very much for turning up today. We have a fascinating interview today with Kerry McCallum, who is the Director of the News and Media Research Centre at the University of Canberra, where she leads a team of researchers to advance public understanding of our changing media landscape. Her research in political communications specialises in the relationships between changing media and the Australian social policy, particularly in indigenous affairs. Kerry is also the lead professor on the Breaking Silences Media and the Child Abuse Royal Commission project, which is the first Australian research document to explore the connection between the media and the Commission's inquiries in the digital age. Fascinating stuff. Kerry is a major contributor to the field of communication and media studies in Australia and internationally, notably as the former president of the Australian and New Zealand Communication Association, and she is also a member of the Australian Institute for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. Kerry's implemented a complex curriculum development and change management process at the faculty, university and national levels, notably as UC's inaugural academic director of graduate research from 2017 to 2019. Her career has been supported and grounded by nearly a decade of professional experience working in federal parliament, political and media advisory roles. And she joins me in the studio. Kerry, thanks very much for coming on to GovComms.
Hi, David. It's great to be here.
There's so much that we could talk about, really, out of all of that, isn't there? Where do we start?
I had forgotten some of those adventures.
It happens, doesn't it, in our careers that are so rich with opportunity. How have you managed your career, just as an interest? You know, have you purposefully thought about things, or have you just gone through your career thinking, oh, gee, that looks interesting, I might go over there?
Yeah, I would say it's more that take the opportunities when they arise. But on the other hand, when you're making the leap into academia, you have to make some pretty big commitments along the way. And probably the game changer for us is doing a PhD. Yeah. Plunging into 3, 4 or more years of intense study around one particular topic. And that really gives you a strong foundation then. But from then in academia, I have had so many opportunities.
Yeah, right. So in terms of that though, where were you at that stage of your career where you thought to yourself, okay, I think I really want to go into academia? Where had you got to? And obviously there was the opportunity to do it, but as you say, it's a very big career step, because you're going into a completely different field.
Oh, that's really interesting. I would say there's a little bit of a gap in the timeline, but I would say it's after losing the 1996 election.
Right.
Politics is a brutal, exciting combat sport sometimes, and I had thought to myself that I might go down that path. I was very involved in politics, and I was deeply committed to working on in both the policy areas that I was working on in superannuation, various policy settings, and then I decided. Then I lived through the 96 election with a 1-year-old, and I came out the other side of that and thought, no, I think I want to think. I want to think a little bit more. I want to have some time to step back and actually try and understand this game. Yeah. I want to understand why people vote the way they do, why big changes happen in society, why we can have these big policy shifts. And of course, this was around the time of Pauline Hanson. Yeah. So I lived through that election and those discourses emerging again in the Australian public debate. And that gave me some time. Moving out of politics gave me some time to think. And I had an amazing opportunity to write down the oral history of an Aboriginal woman she was a Guma woman from southwest Queensland named Hazel McCallum. And that also just gave me a new passion for understanding Indigenous affairs, both from that heavy political side to the grounded lived experience of one person who had lived through everything.
You will talk about that because I think it's really interesting because I do remember myself when I was up in Parliament House as a reporter. I got to do an interview one day with a lady who had been in or managing mental health, not only her own mental health but people around her. And I remember speaking to her. She'd become an advocate because of what had happened to her. But the power of the story, normally interviews on the program that I was running would sort of, 3 to 4 minutes. But this interview was so powerful, it ran for 17 minutes.
Oh, wow, on radio.
And I served it up to the executive producer and said, listen, this is 17 minutes long. And she said, have you lost your mind? And I said, no. I said, you've got to listen to this. I've been doing this for a long time and I have just spoken to somebody. Australia needs to hear this. And so it ran for the whole 17 minutes and it was just incredible, the impact that it had. And we're going back 20 years now, but I think it was, I know at the time it had a huge impact because everyone picked it up then because it was such a great story and it started that discussion and debate around the importance of mental health and other things. So I'm sure it sounds like it was a similar experience for you that when you spoke with this to understand, and a lot of that, it's really difficult terrain when you're speaking with the Indigenous people.
It really is, yeah. We wrote the story down for Hazel's family because, like so many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families, there's a lot of dislocation. And Hazel was, had never lost connection with her, the area that she was born on, but many people have. So writing down that story, listening to her story, and recording it for her family, and then enabled that story to be told more widely. And it's still used. Absolutely. Sure. It was published in 2000. It's called The Woman from Nowhere, which has sort of got a little bit of irony to it. So she was an extraordinary woman, an absolute mentor to me, and and we're still close with their family.
Interesting. The other point you raised in that earlier answer was life on the hill, life in the political bubble. I ran into a friend of mine who's been up there for the last, probably 15 years. Yep. And she came out of a coffee shop and I looked at her and I was like, God, look at you. You just look completely different. And she said, guess what I've done? I said, you've gone. You've left. And she said, yeah. She seriously looked 10 years younger, healthier, happier, walking along with a dog. And we started, just briefly, we're actually going to catch up and have a bit longer chat, hopefully later this week. But she said it's just, once you're out and you're looking back in at what it is, and this is life on the hill, everybody. Like, this is life in the political realm. Whether you're in London, whether you're in Washington, whether you're in Brussels, it would be exactly the same. Yeah. But explain to me what it's like when you are, in that contact sport on a daily basis, dealing with, everything that goes on. It's just a crazy, crazy place.
It is a crazy place. And I think you have to start out there in the electorates. Yeah. That's where the craziness is happening. Right. That's where you are at the coal face of your constituency. Yeah. It's a really... I was a very young person when I did that. Mm-hmm. I was only, a couple of years out of my degree. And I was faced with the most extraordinary array of different people and inevitably their problems. Yeah. People come to you to have complex problems solved. So, absolutely, in the electorate offices, those people are, really dealing with the coalface every day. Then, of course, there were the inevitable long, gruelling trips up to Canberra, where, really those 2 weeks of Parliament, that's the bubble inside the bubble.
Yes.
That's when we're having really long days, and when you start, advising for a minister, you're preparing briefs and questions on notice or questions without notice for question time. And still, you have a different set of constituents then.
Yes.
You have all the lobbyists. I mean, a lot of my job was dealing with the lobbyists on superannuation.
And everybody wants something.
Yes,
don't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a big part of your job is to actually field that from mine was parliamentary secretary, but, from your minister or parliamentary secretary to ensure that the advice you're providing is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, it was a very interesting time. I learned so much, and mixed with some incredible people. I mean, I think that's the thing. The energy that's up there, the intensity that's up there, means that everybody is going somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I find, my experience of my time up there, in particular, in engaging with the political officers, is that people are very passionate about being there.
Oh.
And making a difference. It's why they're there, because it means something, and that creates an electricity that is just hard to you don't see it in a lot of other workplaces. There's not there's so much at stake, I suppose.
I think that's right. I think they're in 3-year cycles. It's all contract work. Yeah. It's all, we're here today and we might be gone tomorrow. And so I think that adds to the intensity. And also you're trying to make change. Yeah. You're trying to implement big social policy changes that are, that have to be done quickly and effectively. So, I still follow it.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I think we all do. I think once you're in there, once it's part of you, it's part of the joy of living in Canberra, I think, is that, it means something to... Yep. Certainly to those of us who live in... And I think it is for people who work in any of the political systems, whether they're in the media or advisory or whatever they are, or in actually government itself. It's something that never leaves you. I love it. I love it. I can't get enough of it. I've got Parliament tuned in my radio, in my car, and all the nerdy things. Sit up at night.
That's right. There's only a small group of people who really get it.
So tell me, what this podcast is for, generally for people who work in government communication. Mm-hmm. So as someone who's an advisor, and what we try to do is actually get some value for people so that there's things that they can take away and hopefully be better at their work and be more efficient and effective. What advice do you have to government communications people when they're trying to engage effectively into a minister's office? What are some of the things that they should be... That they should do to add value and to be seen and to be valued by the minister and the minister's staff? What are the sort of key things?
Wow, okay, that's a really good point. It's a long time, and the actual technical environment has changed, but probably those fundamentals haven't changed.
No.
I think it's about understanding how politics works, and there is a difference between politics and the operations of government.
Yes.
Political leaders always have an outward focus. So you have to understand that they are always thinking about talking to people, about that outward focus, about communicating simply and succinctly. And it's a bit like with academia. It's translating complex policies that you might be immersed in one element of that policy context.
Yeah.
The minister might have 100 different things on his desk or her desk every single day.
Yeah.
And so it's about understanding, trying to put yourself in their shoes and communicating to them in that way.
Do you have to understand the 100? Do you have to have should you be across, the minister that you're serving and really try to make it part of your work as to understand what it is?
Oh, it can't hurt, and I think the higher up you get, the more that the interrelationship between those different contexts becomes absolutely vital.
Yeah, at that deputy secretary level, that sort of assistant secretary levels where they're in and providing value.
Yeah.
So so after that you jumped into that, but I think into the world of academia. But I'm very interested around that, Breaking Silences project,
Great.
The media and the Child Abuse Royal Commission. Again, God, so distressing, so horrendous. But what have you found? What do you know? What do you now know that you didn't know prior to doing the work?
We've only just started. But when I say that, we've actually been working on this for about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
That's how long it takes
Yeah.
to put together one of these big projects. What do we know so far? We know that the Royal Commission was groundbreaking in its communication strategy. So it had Justice McCallum put communication at the heart. He had a policy of open justice, and that impacted on everything. That impacted on the way, not only the way the Commission did its business in the legal sense and that side of justice, but it meant that right from the very beginning, he had an open and frank relationship with Australia's news media, but he also understood the affordances of digital technology. So that Royal Commission was set up. I say it was set up with a bespoke set of practices, because you can do that in a Royal Commission.
Yep.
A government department is like this organic thing that goes on and on and on year after year.
Yeah.
It never gets to stop and reset.
Yeah.
With a Royal Commission, Julia Gillard announced that Royal Commission in 2012. It was operational by 2013, and it was an institution. It was an organisation that had been set up. So every part of that institution had communication in its
Baked
veins.
into it.
Yep,
Yeah.
baked into it.
Yeah.
And so that means that it ran very differently from any commission before, and I'd probably say most commissions afterwards. But it's groundbreaking, and it will influence the way that other commissions operate, and that's what we want to do. We want to document that. No one's done it before. Yeah. So we want to document that and its impacts and provide that information for future commissions, for future governments setting up commissions.
So in a practical sense, though, what did that commitment to open justice and an understanding of digital technology and that commitment to openness mean in a practical sense from a practitioner's point of view? What sort of things were done that were different?
Probably the big groundbreaker was the live streaming of the public hearings.
Yeah.
That brought the commission to the world.
Yep.
It made it completely global. But that interconnected with the use of social media and an openness to the social media activism that was going on out there. So, there's so many things. The website.
Yep.
The website was a beautiful portal for those people affected, victims, their families, the institutions, to look inside and to follow and become part of that community. So a really strong website, a Facebook page that was interactive, that enabled people to comment. And if you can think of the context we're talking about here, we're talking about some of the most vulnerable and damaged people in the society. They were welcomed into that conversation all the way through.
But then, as you say, there was a start point and an end point. What was done with that community once it was created?
Well,
sustained or just left?
Well, again, that's some of the stuff we're going to be looking at.
Yeah.
I would say engaged with
Yeah.
meant that it actually changed the direction of the Royal Commission.
Okay.
So if you think of Loud Defence, which
Yeah.
started off, it's a beautiful example. One of the things we want to do is look at local grounded activity. So people in their communities living in a place like Ballarat, considered the epicentre of child sexual abuse in the 70s, and social media, completely global, connected. So how do those two things connect? And so the Royal Commission was able to listen to those voices, engage those voices, and that social media activity was part of the reason the Commission ended up going to Rome to interview Cardinal Pell. So it was an openness throughout the Commission that actually will have the biggest impact. That said, it's a really important point that Royal Commissions start and finish.
Yeah.
The findings have been handed down. The government has made its response, but it's now in government's hands. And not in this. I mean, this is another thing about Royal Commissions. They're not just government. They're public.
They belong to the community.
They belong to the community. That's absolutely right. So it's not just government, but it's in particular those institutions that were the subject of that Royal Commission. It's up to them to implement those findings and really cultural change. It said that's what the government said when it responded. It said this has to be a cultural change across the community. So government has responsibility. Those institutions have responsibility. But this is, I think, where the media comes in. When that media spotlight shifts, what's happened to those voices that might have been heard? And that's another thing we've been looking at a lot in this research. Our first paper is about how media emphasised some stories over others. Right. So part of this open justice approach was to listen to all of the voices. And if you remember when Julia Gillard announced the Royal Commission, she said, if you feel you've never been heard before, this is your opportunity. Yeah. And that's what the Royal Commission did. It wasn't just about the Catholic Church. It was about sporting organisations, hospitals, Salvation Army, orphanages, out-of-home care, historically and in the present. But our research to date has shown that that's not really the story that the public got.
Yeah, right.
The story the public got through the mainstream news media is one about the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And of course, that was, I think, huge.
Big part of it.
Absolutely. About 60% of the private hearings related to churches. Yeah. So, I suppose to someone who's in the media, it's self-evident. That's how we understand these stories.
Yeah.
We have an individual. We have a figure.
Yeah.
We have George Pell.
Yeah.
That's how we can make sense of something so heinous that was happening in our own community that we all stood by and let happen for so many years.
Yeah, but that's part of the theory now, isn't it? About the trial of Pell and the conviction and the narrative around is he carrying the can for everything that went on, and perhaps there's some truth to that.
Yeah, and I mean it's the way news values work.
Yeah.
It's the way journalistic news values work. It was the perfect storm.
Yeah.
You had a high-profile person, you had connections, we had a high-profile institution, the highest.
Yeah, yeah.
You had connections with government.
Yes.
You had that. You had people. You had support from some of the most influential spokespeople across the nation. It was a big game. For Pell to fall was monumental.
Yeah.
And so it's not that we put a critical media studies lens on this.
Yeah.
It's not that we're saying, of course, in media terms, that's the big story. Of course, this is the one that helps the community to understand. But what about all of those other victims? What about all of those other institutions? Is the spotlight on them?
Yeah.
Are they being held to account?
Yeah.
So we want to dig deep and really understand how the media played a role in shaping understanding.
It's going to take a long time, isn't it? But then again, it's an important piece. It's an important piece of work. But if we just pull the lens up a little bit higher then and look down across the, evolving media landscape, what are your views or your assessment of this rapidly evolving, changing, fragmenting, media environment? It is such a different world, and it's changing so quickly. Around, how do they stay alive? Commercially, such that they can fund their businesses, and how do they respond? Where do they, the traffic, the role of the big platforms? And you're just back from Oxford. Interestingly, Kerry's just been away. There's the annual Reuters report where there's a global analysis of news media on an annual basis, and Kerry's just been at the annual meeting over at Oxford University. So, yeah, where is the world sitting on all of this from an academic point of view? What were some of the discussions that were at that meeting about, and what are some of the big takeaways?
Oh, it's a really interesting field to be involved in at the moment. We thought, journalism's under attack, journalism's dying. Journalism's not going anywhere.
No.
It's been fundamentally transformed. The business model that we knew, that we understood, that a lot of my own research was based on. The voice of the big media, the big journalist, is still enormously important. But it's in a mix that is so diverse and so, you use the word fractured. It takes an incredibly savvy media organisation to stay on top of that. One of the things that was talked about interesting was local journalism. So, local journalism has probably taken some of the biggest hits of all. We talk about news deserts where particular towns are without a newspaper. What's happening there? Where are they getting their news from? At the same time, we've got a global digital, news environment. As you say, we've got platforms that are really now media organisations. The ACCC's just looked into that. What are their responsibilities? Journalism came with a set of responsibilities, or journalism as we knew it, I think I should say, came with a set of responsibilities to inform the world about what was happening. And so this changing media environment has just impacted on that enormously. And I don't think we know all the answers yet.
Do you think there'll be a return to that commitment to those values of, fairness and impartiality? Or have we moved so far to a point where to stay alive we have to maybe move away from some of those bedrock values in order to survive?
I think the values have to remain. I think the technologies, the institutions have changed so much that they have to, that lots of other people have to understand and engage with those values. I think the big organisations have to engage with those values.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating discussion, isn't it? And it's a live discussion globally about the role of your Facebooks and your Googles and these, Amazon, Apple.
Disinformation is another huge topic. So I also went to a conference where we just couldn't stop talking about how to manage how politics has just changed fundamentally.
And but the role of the regulators in all of this is fascinating, isn't it? It's how do you, because we have never seen companies as big and as influential and as commercially rapacious as someone like a Facebook, who, how can it be controlled? It's fascinating. And this is a live discussion today, in London, in Brussels, and obviously the Europeans, the GDPR Act. United States, they really don't know where to go with it at the moment. There's. And how to resolve it. But I was listening to some podcasts over the weekend about, what is going to happen, because people just don't know. You have people like Craig Newmark from Craigslist, who's investing huge amounts of money in community journalism, as you were speaking before, is how do they rebuild that? The commitment here in Australia from Nielsen, I can't remember what her first name is,
Judith
Nielsen, who's now, I think, $100 million in how, trying to restore, because, journalism's seen as the way that, power is held to account in communities. And I think
that's right. Investigative journalism.
Yeah.
I think, and that's what I mean about the journalism as we know it. It's just not people, on the news, in a big newsroom anymore. It's a whole lot of people, and it may not be those traditional companies that fund investigative journalism, but it still has to go on. Otherwise, we'll never get to the point where where there will be challenges. We need that sort of. We need the people who can step back and take a look and really challenge and hold power to account.
So when you went to Oxford, did you leave thinking, or did you leave thinking we've sort of got a half an idea about what we're doing. Yeah, okay, it's lining up. I can see the discussions. There's an alignment perhaps around some of the thinking about some of the solutions around this stuff, or is it, or are we still in the tumble dryer trying to work our way clear?
I think institutions like the Reuters Institute are helping us to, and my own research centre, I hope, helping us to pull apart the different changes that we have to look at. So no, I did feel like I felt like, yes. You said something before about different regulatory environments.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of comparative study.
Yeah.
I think we just can't all be in our own countries obsessed about our own situation. We have these changes are happening globally, and we need to look at, okay, so in Denmark, a change is going to make a different impact than it is in India.
Yeah.
Or, there's more and more Asian countries joining the Digital News Report now.
Yep.
So this is truly global. No, I left excited. I left thinking there's a lot to do. Yeah. Yes, I agree with you. We don't understand everything yet.
Yeah.
But that's sort of what we do, is we try and tease apart these different problems and have a look. News literacy, really important for us.
Big.
Really
the disinformation
important
piece, I think that's, to me, that's a huge part of the challenge to democracy, really.
Yep.
Is it how well organised and how committed are the big platforms who are so dominant to actually getting on top of it. Zuckerberg was in Washington, I think, last week speaking, saying, we're doing our best, we're investing all of this money, you can't break us up because, we're the ones... we need the money to be able to do the fight. But again, I was listening to a podcast over the weekend with it's a podcast called Pivot with Scott Galloway. Galloway, an academic from New York University, and Kara Swisher, a journalist. And anyway, that the point that they were raising was someone somewhere is going to have to do something soon, and their point was that really it's going to have to be. Turn off the tap, the money, some regulatory organisation in some country with an election coming up saying, sorry, we don't think that this is going to work for us. We don't trust that you've got this under control. We're going to turn you off. And as soon as they'll solve the argument being they'll solve the problem as soon as they need to. And the best way to make those big companies act is to, make it financial.
Follow the money.
Follow the money, exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. Yep. But on that very positive note, and I'm very pleased that we were able to get to that, but we'll get you back. There's so much to talk about. And I'll be really fascinated as you go through some of your research. And there's so much we didn't get to in our half an hour, but fascinating conversation with Kerry McCallum, who's the Director of the News and Media Research Centre at the University of Canberra. So, Kerry, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, David. It's been a pleasure. And as you say, there's so much to talk about. Indeed,
there is. Okay, and to you, the audience, thank you for tuning in once again. Sincerely appreciate it. I really do. I love the opportunity to do this podcast and to speak to you wherever you are in the world interested in this issue of government communication, because we are committed to improving the capability in government to communicate effectively, because if we can do that, I think we're half a chance of making some inroads around those big issues of trust in democratically elected institutions. If we can tell better stories, if we're more effective at explaining what governments do, then hopefully the community can trust government more and we can move forward from there. Anyway, thank you so much for coming once again. I'll be back at the same time in 2 weeks' time, as I always am. But for the moment, it's bye for now.
You've been listening to the GovComms podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes.